A funny thing can happen to a watch collector, or really any customer of anything. When you have a good experience with a brand, you find yourself building a relationship with it in your mind. You know what it's called, brand loyalty. And watch brands know all about it. It's why there are entry-level pieces for every large watchmaker. Once they get a single watch into a collector's watch box, there's a good chance it's only the first of many. I only own one Cartier watch, for now. But in the short time I've owned this medium Santos, I've become much more interested in Cartier's watchmaking, both its past and its future. I'd like to think that I'm impervious to the psychological effects of brand loyalty, but honestly, I've become a total sucker. Which is why I've assembled these 4 watches. 2 Santoses and 2 Tanks. I don't have these for you, this is for me. Brand loyalty is a hell of a drug. You've already met my medium Santos, and this is the 2021 Tank Must and the extra large size. This is another tank, the Tank Americaine, reference 1741, and this is a 2021 limited edition Santos Dumont. Like I said, 2 tanks and 2 Santoses, Santosium Los Santos? All 4 watches are pretty different, and all 4 give me that feeling that makes you think, I don't really need to eat food every day, do I? Wouldn't this watch make me happier? Both the Santos and the Tank have been in the Cartier catalog for more than 100 years. That's pretty wild. There aren't many watchmakers that can claim something like this, even those brands that have been around longer than Cartier. Despite being less well known than the Tank, the Santos was the first of these to be available to the public. The story is well documented elsewhere, so I'm not going to give you a history lesson here. Though there will be a test. In fact, everything is a test. The short story is that in 1904, Louis Cartier was asked to design a wristwatch for his friend, the aviator Alberto Santos Dumont. And a few years later, in 1911, the Santos was made available to the public. It looked more like this than this, which is probably why this one is called the Santos Dumont, and this one is simply called the Santos. Well, I guess I should say that the shape of the original was closer to the Santos Dumont. This specific watch is actually an interesting departure for Cartier, and that's why I like it so much, and why I'm so happy to finally get this in front of a video camera. This is an extra large Santos Dumont. It's 34mm across, 46mm long, and only 7.5mm thick. It might sound like a small watch, but you can see on my 7-inch wrist that it sure doesn't look small, maybe even too big. But at least it's super thin, and it can be that thin because it's powered by a manually wound movement, the Cartier Caliber 430 MC, which is actually an ultra-thin Piaget 430P. But what's really distinctive about this watch is the dial. It's a salmon dial with a spiral pattern and Arabic numerals. Each of those things, the dial color, the pattern, and the numeral style, is pretty rare for Cartier, let alone having them all together on one watch. And I'm sorry to tell you that this is limited to only 500 pieces, and I'm pretty sure they're all gone. The full reference number for this watch is in the description of this video, but the simple name for it is the number 19 Santos Dumont. But here's a Santos you can still find in stores, and this one is a much better daily wear. I bought this watch in January of this year, 2021, and in those few months it's gotten a lot of wrist time, maybe tied with my 36mm Explorer. I have an entire video dedicated to this watch. You can find the link below. It's in that video that you'll find out how and why I picked the medium size instead of the large for my 7-inch wrist. So you can just watch the video instead of asking me on Instagram and in YouTube comments. I made a whole video about it. What more do you people want? And I get it. So many people ask because they know. They know how good this is, how versatile, how handsome, how timeless. If you've got a few good tool watches already, you should be considering the Santos next. That's if you're unwell enough to spend $7,000 on a piece of jewelry. 100 meters of water resistance, comes with a bracelet and a leather strap, automatic with no date, it's a charmer. The Tank is Cartier's most famous watch. While it's not as old as the Santos, it's pretty damn old. 1917. Since then it's become an icon and one of the go-to dress watches for generations. There have been and are a lot of variations of the Tank. The purest current reference being the Tank Louis, which neither of these are. Though of these two, the 2021 Tank Must is the most traditional. It's square and uses rounded brancards. Those are the sides of the tank. Very early tanks weren't quite as round as this, but this Tank Must is close to what the Cartier tank has come to mean. This one is steel and uses an automatic movement and is pretty big. I recently did a video about this extra large Must. You can also find that link below. In the time since I posted that video, I've read a lot of your comments and had some time to think about this watch. I love the guilloche dial and that it has a mechanical movement. I also really like the price of $3,700. But at 31mm by 40mm, I do think it's too big for my 7-inch wrist. And for those of you playing along at home, that's the third time I've mentioned the circumference of my wrist. See how much I care about you freaks? The Tank Americaine is a relatively new tank variation. It was introduced in 1989 and was only available in precious metals until 2017. Even in white gold like this, the Americaine is the more affordable sibling of the Tank Cintre. The Cintre debuted in 1921 and is still around today. It's also elongated but more curved than the Americaine. It's also at least twice the price. This specific Tank Americaine is the white gold reference 1741 and is from the year 1999. The 1741 is no longer in production. It's 45mm long, 26mm wide, and 9mm thick. It's almost exactly the same dimensions as the current steel Americaine in the large size. Just a half a millimeter thinner, in fact. Unlike the current steel reference, this gold Americaine has a date, and the dial has a subtle guilloche finish. This Americaine surprised me when I first put it on. It felt instantly right. It's certainly not perfect though. I would lose the date, it's almost illegible anyway. And it's hard to wind with this tiny crown. But man, I like wearing this thing. Maybe I'll go for a steel reference or a yellow gold someday. You see? This is how they get ya. Before I bought the Santos was the only Cartier watch I was interested in. I barely even knew what other lines they made. But after a few months of thoroughly enjoying the Santos, I'm wrist deep in Cartier, its history and its watches. It doesn't always happen to me like this. I didn't get this way when I bought my first IWC or my first Omega, but I could argue that neither of those brands has the same rich history and attention to design as Cartier. Yeah, I said it, what? But I actually think my interest in Cartier, and maybe a lot of people's recent interest, is a response to the sports watch craze that we've seen in the last 5 years or so. Maybe some of us are slowly taking off our brushed steel blinders and looking around at all the beauty we've been ignoring. Considered classical, elegant watches like these Cartiers. Whoa, brand loyalty is a hell of a drug.